This episode of Mark My Words is sponsored by the Coatings Alliance, makers of C2 paint. When C2 President Tom Hill asked me my opinion of what would make a program for their super premium wood finish product, Guard, more attractive to dealers, I shared my view that dealers look for three things when they're considering putting new products in their stores. They want a low initial investment. They don't want to have to spend any money on equipment, and they want to know that if the program is not successful, that they can send the product back. And so that's exactly what C2 put together in their program for Guard. I only wish my daughter Buckwheat would listen as well. So if you're interested in hearing more about this program, you can do one of two things. You can go to c2dealer.com to read more, or you can email Tom Hill yourself and ask him any questions you have. That's th4 at c2paint.com. Hey, everybody, it's Mark. Thanks for joining me today. With me today on my episode is Frank Cohen. Frank is a consultant who works with independent paint retailers, and what he does is maximize returns on design and decor and wallpaper and window treatment departments. And if you don't have a department like that, he can actually initiate that process for you. I came across Frank. I didn't even know he was doing this. Frank and I are old friends. I've known Frank since he owned two paint stores in New York Metro, just a little bit north of the city, when I was a young paint dealer. And I got to know Frank, trading paint with him. And we had a couple of sales reps that we shared. So we had some overlapping business a little bit. And of course, I knew him. Anybody who's ever been to an All Pro show when Frank was a member knows Frank. He was always the happiest guy at the bar in the meetings and the biggest smile. And so I've known Frank for years, and he got in touch with me a couple of weeks ago and told me what he was up to and asked if I had any, advice or anything I could give him how to reach out to paint dealers and share what he's doing. And I was like, I think what you're doing is really cool. So let's have you on a podcast and see what other retailers think. And so there are a lot of different business models for independent paint dealers, right? And one of the more successful ones, particularly for the smaller dealers that don't want to invest $1 million in 6 stores, one of the better ones is a design store within a paint store. One of the things that I've always advised dealers on when I've worked with them over the years, you want to keep your paint purchases somewhere in the 40-50% range of your purchases, of your total volume. And the reason you want to do that is if your paint and your paint sundries is 95% of what you're doing, then you better hope that consumers are looking to buy paint that year, or you're out of business. You're going to have a really difficult year. The dealers that do a good job of keeping their paint volume, their paint purchases low as a percentage of their total purchases, they do that by increasing their wallpaper purchases, increasing their window treatment purchases, increasing their purchases of decor. There are other ways to do that. And when you do that, you create for yourself a more diversified business that's not dependent necessarily on any one department to succeed. You can have down quarters with wallpaper. You can have a year go by where you don't get the big wallpaper or window treatment sale, but you've got paint and paint has been strong, and so you're doing okay. Or you've got paint and your hardware has been strong, or sometimes paint is not strong, and same thing can go for the wallpaper, the window treatment. So it's a good idea to diversify your offering. And what Frank is talking about is really a turnkey way to do that for dealers that don't have anything. And for dealers that are in that space, you're listening to a guy who's got a doctorate on how to do this. Frank was one of the first dealers that I knew that had a paint store that was really a design store as well, or even primarily a design store. And of course, he sold paint, and he had, in addition to that, he had big brush selections. He had all the sprayers and the ladders. He had all of that too. But in that, he also had a very big design center, and I'm talking about going back to the 1980s. He had that and was very successful with that over the course of his career. I know that his experience brought a lot of success to the All Pro group. He was president of the group for a time, and certainly instrumental on some of the committees, the wallpaper and the window treatment committees. And so he really knows the space. And so if you're an independent dealer, if you're a paint dealer, and you're not overly happy with the performance that you're getting from your design and decor department, or you think you could sell more wallpaper and window treatment, or you think you're not getting the margins or getting the opportunities that you would think you would in your market, then listen to Frank or reach out to Frank, and he's really a great resource for helping you fix that problem. So give a listen, shoot me a text, like, subscribe, you know the story, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. With me today is one of my oldest friends from the paint industry, and I'm gonna get right into it with him and let him describe how we know each other. Frank Cohen. Frank, it's fabulous to see you.
And Mark, it's great to be on your podcast, and it's great to see you in a Yankee hat. And
so Frank, you are one of the few people in the paint business around long enough to answer this question. Was I as big a schmuck at 30 as I am at 57?
I think you're improved with age.
Okay,
kind of like a Boone's Farm fine wine.
Yeah.
But
I'm an acquired taste.
I love the current look. I love the goatee. It looks good on you, Mark. And
thanks, Frank. Thanks.
I appreciate you having me here.
Yeah. So let's get to it. You have a fabulous story. We have a lot of parallels in our path. You were an independent retailer. We're going to get into why you're here now, what it is that you want to talk about here today. But let's talk a little bit about your history. How did you become an independent paint retailer?
Great. Well, like so many of my friends and colleagues, they kind of grew up with parents owning a paint and wallpaper store. And my dad bought his paint store in 1950 in Poughkeepsie, New York. And there's a little history.
Was that the store that I knew? Is that the Sun store that I knew?
That was, yes. He
Wow.
And he emigrated from Holland post World War II with my mom. And my mother's mother was living in New York City, and they wanted to be close to the metropolitan area. And my father came from a wallpaper manufacturing family. In the 30s and 20s and 30s, my grandfather had a wallpaper factory in the Netherlands. My father worked there and traveled on a bike, distributing wallpaper books, trying to place books. So wallpaper was always part of his life. And then when they came to New York in the 50s, they wanted to buy a business, and this business, Sun Wallpaper and Paint, was for sale in Poughkeepsie. It was a 1920 business, so it was somewhat of a mature business.
And I remember that store very well. I was there a number of times, as you know.
You know, like many of your listeners, I graduated college on a Friday, and that Monday actually that Saturday, I think.
Right.
I was in the store, and he, started me in the warehouse, and then I did some road sales, and eventually, did what most of us have done, and then slowly take over. And I think he did a good job in trying to keep me under wraps. And
that store was interesting to me because as a New York City guy, I was living sort of a different life than you in terms of business. I had my stores in the Bronx, and we were basically Benjamin Moore, sort of blow and go, high volume stores. We were in New York City. We had, one parking space in the front. If you happen to have a quarter in your pocket, for the meter, you could take it. And I remember the first time I saw your store. First off, if I'm not mistaken, it was enormous. And at least by New York City standards.
Sure.
You had a big parking lot, and you had wallpaper books and window treatments. You were really a design center, and one of the first ones that I knew of in the market.
Well, we had an interesting scenario at that time, or in Poughkeepsie. there was a Ben Moore dealer who was a great dealer and very clean competition. And Sun was never going to get the Ben Moore line. So we had
I
other
remember
lines,
this.
Pratt and Lambert,
Yep.
DeVoe,
Yep.
before it was acquired. And, you know, we were really selling our name Sun, and the design end and then the commercial paint end, which some of our lines were very strong in, especially DeVoe.
The DeVoe
Um,
was a really good line in New York with commercial painters back in. Frank and I are now talking about probably, I'm talking about anyway, probably the late 80s, early 90s. DeVoe, very strong.
It was actually, I think DeVoe was the first paint coating in America, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Yep.
So, you know, and we were blessed with a lot of schools, hospitals, institutions, which we focused on. We knew that by not having Ben Moore, we had to have some things that would bring people in. Since my dad came from wallpaper, wallpaper was always a big part of our business. And then that transcended into window treatments, area rugs, and all of those things. And you know, one of the things that I found interesting was that we just weren't a retailer with design and decor. A lot of the schools, like the culinary and Vassar College at the time, they needed design products and design help. And, you know, a lot of times dealers don't realize that it's just not homeowners coming in that need window treatments or wallpaper. A lot of times you can parlay your existing relationships with commercial accounts, and having those things is a great way to keep other people out of your accounts.
The
Business.
easiest way to grow your business, in my opinion, is to sell more stuff to the people that are already coming into your stores, you know?
Exactly.
And
And
and so I want to spend some more time talking about your stores, because I remember Sun was a very unique store. Like I said, back in New York, when I would have come across it for the first time, there weren't a lot of paint stores that look like you. But I know that you don't own it anymore. So why don't we talk a little bit before we get too far away from where we started? Where are you now? I know you don't own the stores anymore.
so yeah, we were acquired, I think by a larger entity in 2011.
Yep.
And at the time, I was working for the person who acquired us. And during that time, one of my dear friends in the paint business, Elliot Greenberg, suggested that maybe I could start the design and decor division in the Rings End company in Connecticut. And it was
Right up your alley.
it was a heck of an opportunity,
Yep.
and a great operation. And it was kind of the ultimate challenge because, you know, it was a three-generation lumber and paint company. Elliott brought paint in about 22 years ago. They sold no
Yep.
paint.
Yep.
Today, I think they might be the one or two Ben Moore dealer in the country.
I
And
believe you're right. And it's funny, I remember 25 years ago when they were a Pratt and Lambert dealer with a relatively low volume.
yes, so Elliot gave me the challenge of starting. They at the time they had 3 stores that were doing some window treatments, and he wanted me to roll out 12 more design centers within a year or two, and bringing in other design products. I spent 7 years building a design and decor business for Rings End, which today is flourishing and doing really, really well.
Yep. And that's Rings End is the all pro member slash paint slash lumber distributor. And they're right here in Connecticut. Actually, they're in my backyard. Their corporate headquarters right up the street in Darien.
Exactly. And you know, I'm glad you mentioned you know, All Pro briefly, because Sun was a member of All Pro, and as is Rings End. And
Oh
I
yeah.
spent a lot of time at All Pro meetings. I believe in it. I actually was a past president and member of the board, and I spent about 10, 12 years as head of the Decorative Products Committee, which really trained me how to negotiate what was important to, you know, to vendors, And I tried to teach vendors what was important to us in terms of things that, the independent retailer needed to succeed in design and decor. And all of my paint years added up to give me a lot of experience, which kind of segued into the fact that I wanted to start my own consulting business. And I wanted to assist and help the independent paint dealer diversify and get into other products with higher margins, because a lot of people sell paint. And as you know, Mark, a ton of dealers are now getting into hardware.
Yep.
Many are buying into the True Value or Ace franchises, and
Yep.
and that is a great way to keep paint stores busy all year round, not just seasonally. And design and decor is an all year round business, and can be a function of paint and color.
And you're selling to the same customer, which is, again, like we said before, what an easy way to increase your sales volume is to sell an extra something to the person who's already standing at your counter.
That customer's in your store for a reason. They trust you. They take your advice. A dealer has probably helped them with either deliveries or solving a color problem. And that trust factor is all you really need to move forward with other products. A lot of the independent paint stores have color consultants. And if you have a color consultant and you're not taking that part of the business and moving forward with design, you're 90% there. And I would say
you're missing a big opportunity is what you're saying.
Yes, because you're getting the trust factor of helping someone with their colors. A lot of time homeowners want that color consultant to go into their homes. And then once you go into their home, I think that, I don't know what the PDCA percentage is, but usually it's 80 or 85%. You're going to sell them other things.
Right. And I'm in the house. I can close the sale.
Exactly. And, there's always space. One of my challenges at Rings End was to find space. And there's always space to be found within your existing store. Sometimes you need an outside eye to walk around and look at, what you have. Just one thing that we've done is actually, if any of the paint dealers out there stare at their paint rack, there's a lot of wasted space right there. And that's where a lot of the eyes first start. And if those eyes are looking at paint chips, and then on the bottom, they might see, wallpaper books and well-branded books that might be kind of eye candy to some of your customers, it leads to conversations. Oh, I didn't know you sold wallpaper. Oh, yes, we do. And then, in terms of window treatments, all it takes is one.
You added window treatments at Rings End as well?
Yeah, they had 3 stores carrying Hunter Douglas, but we rolled out another 12 stores. And that was a challenge. There's a lot of vendor help that takes place, and a lot of companies will do a planogram on your existing layout, find you the space you didn't think you had. And, sometimes, dealers get a little used to their own layout, and sometimes they have low margin items, like joint compounder, boxes of rags, or things stacked up where, yes, they're impulse items, but at the same time, if you had something that could lead to a $5,000 or $10,000 sale at 40 points, it makes a lot of sense.
And so you hung around Rings End. They used you up for about a decade, and then what happened? Because I know you're in California now, so we're missing a little piece of the story.
Well, what happened is my daughter I had a grandson out west.
Nice.
And I realized that, I had one daughter in New York, one daughter in San Francisco area in Marin. And I really didn't want to be tied down to stores, but I still really loved the paint business. And I wanted to be able to use some of my 40 years worth of experience to help dealers. And
you could see all those 40 years on your face, Frank. I just want you to know you look like shit. I remember when you were a handsome guy. That's how long I've been around.
Age has taken its toll. And I think everybody says paint years are like dog years. It's probably paint years about 15 years. So I'm probably about 180 in real life. But,
So you left Rings End and
I started this,
retired effectively.
I guess I retired and felt the need to keep my brain moving. And since, I hate to say it, but when I'm in towns, I like to go into paint stores, and I always feel
Yeah,
comfortable there. And some people
I
like
know.
hardware stores, and some people whatever. But with me, I love paint stores, and I don't go in there to criticize. I just go in there to say, hey, what's their brand and what are they
Yep.
pushing and what are their brush line, and I always feel comfortable in paint stores. Maybe it's just because of my youth, always being in my dad's paint store, but I've been able to take my love of these stores and, look at them and see things that maybe the owner doesn't see, and be an intro to the owner to all the vendors that I've dealt with over these many years, whether it's in the wall covering industry or the area rugs or all these add-on sales, window treatments, and the ability to use those both for retail and commercially is a big asset for these paint stores.
And so what you're doing now is advising or consulting independent retailers of really any size on how to either install, if they don't have one, a design and decorating center that can help drive volume and profit, or to sort of reaffirm their commitment to one that they already have if it's not doing well. Does that about sum it up?
Yeah, I mean, if a dealer gets me involved where they currently have a design department, they might want me to audit their existing deals in place. There's book plans, there's a lot of fabric companies have different plans. And, again, it's just an outside eye looking at how they're buying and who they're partnering with. And I think it's always more fun for me to start from scratch with someone
Yeah.
and looking at their layout and saying, well, we could put something here, and then your flow goes this way, and we don't want to lose that as they go to your cash register, and so it's been a lot of fun. It really has been. A lot of dealers feel this need to, have spray equipment and spray, that's a typical add-on to their business model. Trouble is the spray equipment world, the margins are much smaller. There's
Yep.
a lot of pressure to get a pump out the next day if it needs repair, and your percentage on parts aren't always that good in the competition. You're feeding right into the competition a little bit. So yes, it's nice to have spray equipment, but it's also great. Someone once said, a yard of fabric can cost $100, and a 60-pound pail of joint compounds about,
Right.
$15. And,
Right.
which one would you rather sell?
Right. Right.
So
And so what exactly can dealers expect in terms of dealing with you from the experience right from the beginning? Somebody comes along and says, yeah, I want to improve my decor or design department. Where are you going to start?
Well, I assess the market. I see who their competitors are, both in just standard paint stores, also where are the boxes in town. Also, who are the designs? What are the design stores, and what are they carrying, and what they have? So I do a market analysis, and then I do a store analysis, and not only just how the imprint of their store, but do they have a color consultant, and is this person the right person? Do they have interest in hiring a designer? If they do, sometimes I can help them with that, or be part of the interview.
So after you do this and you sort of take your assessment, what are typically the opportunities that you're looking for?
Well, I'm gonna once I do the market analysis, I'm gonna tell them, hey, listen, there's not really a Hunter Douglas dealer nearby, or yes, Hunter Douglas would probably be hard for you to get, but I think I should take you in another direction. And does your color consultant have enough knowledge in the window treatment business, or do we have to get them trained? And who are we going to
Right.
partner with to do the training? And that just snowballs. The wallpaper business itself is not that difficult to get into immediately. Pick the right vendors and decide what your margin should be competitive. I think and unfortunately, the world of today, a lot of people are scared of wallpaper because of the 800 numbers.
I
But
always was. I wasn't scared of the wallpaper for the 800 numbers, Frank. I was always scared because I didn't have any knowledge or experience in that space. That's the same reason why I never really messed around with wallpaper or window treatments or any of the other design components that you're talking about. I had no experience, no connections, and I was terrified, frankly. And so that
well,
stopped me from moving forward.
the wallpaper is such a great extension to paint. For a while, wallpaper was really not as popular as it has become again.
Yeah.
But no different than when you're selling a can of paint. Do you say, do you need a brush roller or some caulk? When you're selling color, what rooms are you working on? Do you want, it seems like the entry in Connecticut used to always be, we're going to do a powder room with some wallpaper. And that's for someone who hasn't done it in a while. And then we immediately begin the conversation. And a lot of times the color consultant will end up doing a shop at home, and it just leads to nice margin business.
And so once you get started, you make those suggestions to them, and this starts sort of being integrated into their business. What can dealers expect as far as performance? Are we looking for additional sales? Are you looking for additional margin? You're trying to get both for people? Where's the opportunity here?
I think if you lay out a simple design department within a paint store, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to do $200,000 to $300,000 in sales within the first 18 months, at a blended margin of anywhere from 38 to 45 points.
Right.
Sometimes you have to save a wallpaper sale by matching a price on the 800 numbers. The one thing I forgot to mention about design and decor, I don't know what made me just think of it, was that it's a special order item. There's no inventory. It's
Yeah.
paid in full. There's no receivable. There's
Yep.
a nice margin to it. So I remember explaining to the owner of Rings End that, and he kind of looked at me and goes, "Well, that sounds pretty good." So,
Yeah, exactly. No,
you know,
to me, I've had a similar conversation with people as I'm talking about websites, and I tell them all the same thing. It changes completely the relationship. You get your money before anybody gets their paint.
oh,
And and
100%.
and that's a much better formula than the one I was using at Tremont Paint in the Bronx, where sometimes you'd give a guy some paint in January and it would be March or even April until you got to get your hands on that money.
Well, customers understand, no different than buying furniture or things. You have to put a deposit on it or pay in full when it arrives. And what I've noticed most is that dealers have this fear of the unknown, and they should not be scared of it. And when they worry about installation, for instance, with window treatments, well, Hunter Douglas has an installation service. You literally can take your customer that looks at one display. You can email the installer to go to their house and measure. You can then pick out what they need. It gets shipped to the installer's house. You don't touch it. Then upon installation, you're invoicing a really nice sale, and
Yeah.
it works.
I think that what you're offering is so interesting to me because when I think about the reasons why I never got into this space in my two stores, it was frankly only my fear of my inexperience. The few $1,000s that you would have had to invest in books and some displays and stuff is not a lot, and of course space is always tight in New York City. But yeah, we could have put in a easy enough to find a spot to put 100, 200 square feet of good display in. I just didn't know where to start. And that's what, when you and I were chatting the other day, that's what I thought was so impressive about what's so interesting, I should say, about what you're offering is that for anybody thinking like, it is a good idea. I know I should be doing some of this stuff, but I don't know where to start. Well, here you go. This is where you start.
Sure. It's pretty simple and pretty turnkey.
Well, Frank, that was really an interesting conversation, and I really appreciate you making the time to sit down with me, and even changing your
Anytime,
shirt
Bob.
when when Frank came on, he was wearing a shirt that was the same color as the wall in the background, and all you saw was face.
But when Mark had his Yankee hat on, I said, you know what, Mark, things don't change. So it's great to see you, and thank you.
It's great to see you, Frank. Before we let you go, do you want to tell people how to get in touch with you in case a dealer wants to reach out?
That would be great. I guess the best way is just to email me with their information. Then we can move on to a phone call. But my email is fs, as in Sam Cohen, Cohen 22@gmail.com.
Terrific. And if you didn't get that, by all means, if you're listening, I know you have my email address, or you can go to my website. Feel free to shoot me a text or an email and tell me that you'd like to speak to Frank, and I'll make it happen. Frank Cohen, one of my very dear friends and a consultant to independent paint retailers. It's great to see you.
You too.
And I'm hoping the next time you're in New York, I know you're in California now. I'm hoping the next time you're in New York, I can have you over for a cigar or bourbon or something.
I would like that very much. Anyway,
all right, Frank, take care.